Welcome back everyone, welcome casual deck builders from all over the planet. Today we are going to plant a tree, we are going to save the planet, we are going to stop global warming. Today we go green.
Cool, you know what I'm saying?
Green like what?
Oh, a crystal green, any kind of green, like any green you like.
Okay, that might work better, I don't know. If you know Magic a little bit, you know that green is the color of mana, it's the color of nature, it's the color of big creatures. And in deck building, it's also the color of ramp decks. Now, a ramp deck is a deck where you try to get as much mana as fast as possible to play huge spells or creatures. Now, there are some different forms of building a ramp deck. For example, you can build a ramp deck with a lot of cards like Explosive Vegetation, Kodama's Reach and Rampant Growth, hence the name ramp deck. And you will try to get as much lands as quickly as possible to get ahead on the mana count against your opponent. Now there's another way to build a ramp deck, and that is with enchantments on your lands. Like for example Market Festival or Wild Growth. But we already did that. Remember the River Hoopoe on video number 3?
Ah, finally a chance to redeem myself and prove that I'm the best bird in Magic.
No, we're not going that route again. Let's just continue to the third way of ramping, and that is with mana dorks. Now, mana dorks are little creatures that give you additional mana when you tap them. For example, the famous Llanowar Elf or Birds of Paradise. And this last strategy is the one we're going to use in our deck today. So for the big creatures, we are going to play Tribute to the Hydra. And I'm not talking about the 2009 TV film with the great special effects. Beautiful. Well done. We're also not going to talk about the Czech rock band called Hydra Rock. That was actually not that bad. I kinda liked it actually. But back to the deck, alright. Of course, I'm talking about Gargos and his buddies, and we're going to add a Hydra sub-team in our deck. And I'm also going to splash a little bit of red. You'll see later why. Now, being a casual budget Magic channel, I usually build my decks around 15 euros or $20. Now, this time I went a little bit further, mainly for the splash with red. But don't worry, I also included a more budget-friendly version at the end, so stay tuned. If you say, well, this deck will be maybe a bit too expensive, don't worry, I got something for you in the end. And talking about getting decks for not a lot of money, you can find all the Hydras in this deck on Card Market. You can find a lot of singles there. And the friendly people at Card Market also gave me a voucher, and I'm going to share this with you guys. The only thing you have to do is subscribe to my channel and leave a comment, maybe also like the video, but that's also free for you to do. And at 100 subscribers, I'm giving away my first voucher of 10 euros, and there will be almost enough to buy this whole deck. Alright, enough with the intro, let's make a huge amount of mana and cast big fat Hydras. Early turns are really important as you want to get ahead on mana as soon as possible against your opponent. So getting untapped lands to play your mana dorks is really vital to this deck. I play 14 forests, 3 Game Trail, 3 Cinder Glade, a Rootbound Crag, I also play one Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, and this is a special land which has Devotion. And Devotion says the amount of mana symbols of that color in the mana cost of permanents you control, this is your Devotion cost. So very important. I'll give you an example. Nykthos costs 2 to tap. Now if you have 2 Llanowar Elves, a Gargos and a Llanowar Tribe out, your Devotion is 8, and that means Nykthos will give you 8 green mana. That's a lot, and it's very important in this deck. Now on to the mana dorks. I play 3 Elfish Mystics and 3 Llanowar Elves. It's important to get them onto the battlefield on turn 1 if you want to go really fast. Then I also play 3 Llanowar Tribe. They're actually 3 Llanowar Elves on 1 card, and they give 3 mana, and they're also perfect to add to your Devotion count. And talking about Devotion, I also play 2 Karametra's Acolyte, hugely powerful mana ramping creature. When you tap it, it will add an amount of green mana to your mana pool equal to your Devotion to green. And this could be a lot. So that was it with the mana dorks. Now let's head to the Hydras. And first we're going to start off with Gargos Vicious Watcher. Gargos costs 6 mana, it's an 8/7 vigilance, and Hydra spells you cast cost 4 less to cast. Then, whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a spell, Gargos the Vicious Watcher fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Now, this is of course the king of the Hydras, and it's a really big creature for its cost. I like the creature. We're going to use the second ability a lot because we're going to play a lot of Hydras. The last ability won't come up that often, but that doesn't matter. It's going to be a great staple in our deck. We have 6 slots for the following 3 cards. We play 2 Voracious Hydras. It's a 0/1. It costs 2 green and X, and it has Trample. Now this Hydra enters the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters, equally to the other 2 Hydras on this slide. But when it enters the battlefield, you can choose one. You can either double the amount of counters on the Voracious Hydra, or you can have it fight target creature you don't control. So it could also act as a removal spell. Then we play 3 Genesis Hydra. Now when you cast Genesis Hydra, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put a non-land permanent card with converted mana cost X or less on the battlefield. The idea is to play the Genesis Hydra for at least 6 mana, and then you can find almost all the cards in your deck. I also play 1 Hungering Hydra to get some diversity in my deck. And the fun thing with this one is whenever it's dealt damage, you put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So it really reflects the old mythical Hydra. When you cut off 1 head, it will grow back 2. And also it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So it's actually a cool card from Core 19. Now you might be wondering, why am I splashing red? Well, this is the reason. Just 2 cards, Savageborn Hydra and Apocalypse Hydra. I just like the flavor of those cards, so I just wanted to put 1 of each in there. One is a double strike Hydra that you could also boost. Apocalypse Hydra is also a huge creature, and you could also use its second ability to just do 1 damage to target creature or player. Then we have some more Hydras without X in their casting cost, but nonetheless they are very strong. The first one is Hydra Broodmaster. It's a card from the Terrace block which had more Hydras in it, but I chose this one because I think it works the best, especially with the monstrosity trigger that you could use to make a lot of XX green Hydras. I included 3 of those cards in my deck. It's also a 7/7 for 6 mana, so a big creature for the mana cost. Now, probably one of the most expensive cards in the deck is the Kalonian Hydra. It has trample, it comes into play with 4 counters on it, but whenever it attacks you can double the amount of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. And this is a really powerful ability. Your Hydra will always attack the first turn as an 8/8 trample, and that's not bad for 5 mana. But for example, if you attack a second time with it, it's probably a 16/16 trample. Alright, enough with the Hydras. I also included one Dinosaur. The Gigantosaurus costs 5 green mana and it's a 10/10. Now I especially added this one just for flavor purposes, but also because it's really good with the Devotion team in the deck. So a fun card, a 10/10 for 5 mana, is always fun to play, right? Now, talking about the Devotion team in the deck, I just want to explain how powerful and explosive it can go. For example, on turn 1 you play a Forest and a Llanowar Elf. On turn 2 you have 3 mana. You play another Forest and you tap your 2 Forests and your Llanowar Elf to play a Llanowar Tribe. That means that on turn 3 you already have 7 mana if you can play another land. So you can use that to easily play a big Dinosaur or even Gargos, but even cards with converted mana cost 7. And if you then have the next card, Karametra's Acolyte, you will get a bunch of mana from it. So this is the turns we would like to see. This is how powerful and how explosive the deck could be. You could easily have like say 20 mana, so it could really be insane and fun to ramp up this way. The fun doesn't stop here. I want to continue with the big creatures. I play 1 Regal Force to draw me a bunch of cards, a Soul of the Harvest, which also helps me draw cards when another non-token creature enters the battlefield. And I also play a Soul of Zendikar. It's the only creature with reach in the deck, and it could also make a lot of green beast tokens. And when you have 20 mana, it's easy to make like 3 or 4 beast tokens each turn just to flood the board with tokens and attack your opponent. Then there are 2 creatures which are a little smaller, but also add well to the Devotion and creature team we're going to play. The first one is Nylea's Disciple, and when it comes into play you gain life equal to your Devotion to green. And this is often 8, 9, 10 or even more. So you gain a bunch of life. And if you have a Timur Sabertooth, you can bounce it back to your hand and play it again to gain an enormous amount of life. And then if you have a Soul of the Harvest out there, you also draw a bunch of cards. So a really strong combination, the Nylea's Disciple together with the Timur Sabertooth. And of course the Timur Sabertooth works well with a lot of other cards in the deck. Talking about other cards, no more creatures, but I have added 1 sorcery. The Genesis Wave, it's a bit similar like the Genesis Hydra. So you could also look at the top X cards of your library and you may put any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them to the battlefield. So if you have a huge amount of mana, this could be a lot of cards that go directly into the battlefield. Then I also play 1 Shared Summons, really cool card for green that fetches you 2 creatures with different names. So you could search for a Timur Sabertooth together with a Disciple of Nylea if you're a little bit behind on mana. Or maybe you could search for like Gargos and another big Hydra. Or you could search for a Soul of the Harvest or a Regal Force if you want to draw cards. So really cool cards this instant that will search you creatures. The Shared Summons goes right into my deck. Now I also added some enchantments in the deck because they are also permanents that I could search for with Genesis Hydra or even with Genesis Wave. We play 5 different enchantments in the deck, but the coolest enchantment for the Hydras is of course Unbound Flourishing. It's really the Hydra enchantment you want to have in your deck, because whenever you play a permanent spell with mana cost that contains X, you can double the value of X. So all your Hydras with X in their mana cost will be double as strong. And also when you cast Genesis Wave with the Unbound Flourishing on the battlefield, you can actually cast 2 Genesis Waves. Because if there's an X in the mana cost of an instant or sorcery, this enchantment will double the spell. Talking about enchantments that increase your value and your mana, the Leyline of Abundance makes all your mana dorks even more stronger, because they will tap for an additional green mana, and for 8 mana, and this could seem like a lot, but actually in this deck it's not, you can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. The Colonial Hydra will really like this. Then there's Zendikar Resurgent. For you ADH players, you will already know that this is a great enchantment. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of the type that this land produces, so all your lands cost double, and when you cast a creature spell, draw a card. So great enchantment in the deck that really ramps up the game even more. Of course, you also want to draw some cards, so for that we have Elemental Bond. We have 23 creatures that can have power 3 or more, so you can draw a lot of cards with this card out. And there's also Triumph of Ferocity. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card if you control the creature with the greatest power or tied for the greatest power. So with all the big creatures and Hydras, this will probably be you that will have one of those creatures out, so it always gives you an extra card at your upkeep. Then continuing with the trend of the Elemental Bond, I also play 1 Planeswalker. It's called Kiora Behemoth Beckoner. We have 17 creatures in the deck that could trigger this static ability and draw us a card. And the -1 ability untaps target permanent. So it can untap a Llanowar Tribe, for example, or it could also untap Karametra's Acolyte. But it could also untap your Nykthos Shrine to Nyx and give you a boatload of mana. And if you really want to have a cool Planeswalker, you could go for this nice alternative art Japanese one. I got one in my deck. I also included the English one in my sideboard just to help it explain to my opponents what the card does. Alright, this was the deck. Now let's head into the power rankings. I gave this deck power of 9 because it could play huge spells, it could ramp very quickly, and it's not really a very complex deck to play. So if you're a rather new player, this will be right into your wheelhouse. This will be a great deck for you to try out. Consistency, I gave it a 7. Because you have a lot of 1-drops that will give you mana. You can ramp fairly easily, so it's a rather consistent deck. There's only one thing you want to do with the deck, that's attack, so I gave it a 9 for offense. And defense wise, I only gave it a 4 because it really lacks removal, it really lacks permission spells. So the thing you really want to do is play big Hydras and attack your opponent. And if you want to do the last one, you have to give it fun factor 9. Okay, this was the power rankings. Now let's head into the metagame review. The deck goes pretty fast, and that's why it also plays well against aggressive or mid-range strategies. It will just go over the top of both strategies, so that's why I gave it an 8 and even a 9 against mid-range. Your creatures will be too big to handle for those strategies. And you could even gain a lot of life as well in this deck. Now against control it's not that good because mass removal really hurts the deck. And against combo, well, it's more like a 50-50 split, because if you go quickly enough with your big creatures, the combo deck won't have time to set up its combo. So your strategy against combo is kill your opponent as quickly as possible. Now let's talk about the maybe board cards you wanna play as a commander player if you decide to play Gargos, for example, or if you wanna change a little bit the deck around. Let's have a look. The first one I want to discuss is the best mana dork out there. It's the Birds of Paradise. Why I didn't put in the original deck, there's just one reason. It's a rather expensive card, but if you have some additional amount of money laying around, I would really invest in this card. It's great for an EDH deck, it's great for a lot of decks, so Birds of Paradise, and of course it has amazing art as well. Now let's talk about some more Hydras. The Ulvenwald Hydra searches up your Nykthos, and that's really important for this deck as well. So you could also put one in there. It's a bit more expensive, that's why I didn't put it in my deck. But it's a really cool card, it's a really big creature as well. And it also has reach, and that's great if you want to be a little bit on defense, because the deck isn't that great against flying creatures. Two other Hydras with X in their mana costs are the Hooded Hydra and the Lifeblood Hydra. They both play very well in an ADH strategy with Gargos as well. The Hooded Hydra you can morph and then it makes a bunch of snakes. And the Lifeblood Hydra, when it dies, you gain life and you draw a bunch of cards equal to its power. So two nice Hydras as well to include in the deck. But there are more Hydras. Primordial Hydra is also a very strong Hydra. You double the amount of counters on it each upkeep, and when it has 10 or more counters it also gains trample. So this in combination with Kalonian Hydra is completely crazy. Then there's also a Vastwood Hydra. When this Hydra dies, you can distribute the counters on other creatures. So when this creature dies, the value really remains on the battlefield if you have other creatures out there. And then there is the control player's nightmare, the Mistcutter Hydra. So if you have a lot of control in your metagame, do include this one because it can't be countered, it has protection from blue, and it has haste. So it's really the nightmare of the control player. Then I included two possible gods you can play: Xenagod, God of Revels, and Nylea, God of the Hunt. The first one is a green-red creature. It has devotion to green and red, but green is actually enough. And when your devotion is 7 or more, it will also become an indestructible creature with power 6 and toughness 5. So already a strong creature. Then it has one other cool ability. At the beginning of your combat each turn, it will give a creature haste, and it will also double its creature's power and toughness. So this could be an amazing hard-hitting creature for your deck and for your big creatures and Hydras. Then Nylea is also a god that works with devotion. You have to have devotion 5 to have it become a creature. It will also be an indestructible 6/6. And other creatures you control have trample. You can also pump a little bit of mana in it to have a creature gain +2/+2 until end of turn. And last but not least, I do want to include another X spell. This one is called Banefire. It just burns face and it can't be countered if X is more than 5. And remember Unbound Flourishing, you can double Banefire even on your opponent. So a great addition to the deck and another reason to splash a little bit of red. Alright, remember in the beginning of the deck I told you I'm going to include a more budget version of the deck, so have a look at this more budget version of the deck. I'm going to remove about 20 euros of value out of the deck, and it's mainly the Colonial Hydra, the Unbound Flourishing and Nykthos, which makes the deck pretty expensive for budget requirements. Then there are also 3 Cinder Glades, which are quite costly. Now, what are we going to put in its place? Well, it's fairly simple. We're going to add 1 Banefire. We're going to add 1 Karametra's Acolyte, which replaces a little bit Nykthos. And we're going to add 4 Rugged Highlands. This will make your deck a lot cheaper to buy, but you will have an equal amount of fun to play. So this was it. This was my Hydra Green Super Ram deck. I hope you enjoyed the deck tech video, and remember, always keep it casual. Bye.